David Tuck has been in parish ministry for most of his working life in Norfolk and Greater London. He's delighted that he has been able to continue his work since retirement in 2001. Our interfaith work took a hold soon after we met Reverend Tuck. SICM soon started meeting him and some of his community members at St Albans, and we are fortunate to have welcomed him to our centre many times in the past years now.
I feel I'm among friends here. Thank you for inviting me again. At the general election in 1945, just as the Second World War was coming to an end, Clement Attlee and the Labour Party came to power. The next few years saw the setting up of the National Health Service, national insurance, unemployment benefit, a huge expansion of the education system, a massive housing building program, and large-scale nationalisation. After 6 years of war and the Great Depression before that, most of our leaders and most people were ready to make this country into a more fair, more compassionate, more equal society for all the citizens here, not only the poor as well as the rich. One of the most influential national leaders in getting people ready for change was William Temple. Please change the slide. Archbishop of Canterbury for 2 short years, from 1942 to 1944. Many Christians and others believe that Temple was the greatest Christian leader of the 20th century. President Roosevelt of the United States wrote after his death, Temple was an ardent supporter of international cooperation. He exercised profound influence all around the world. William Temple was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. His father was Archbishop of Canterbury. He was a brilliant scholar, and the first years of his working life he spent teaching philosophy at Oxford University. It was here that he came under the influence of Christian socialist thinkers. He became a member of the Labour Party at that time, and he only left when he became a senior leader or a bishop. He became a priest in 1911. He held various posts, including that of headmaster of the famous private school, Repton. He tried to reform it, and he failed. He then became a bishop, first of Manchester, then of York, then the senior leader of our church, Archbishop of Canterbury. He died 2 years later, aged 61, almost certainly of overwork. And that was almost certainly, at least partly due to the fact that the church headquarters, our church headquarters in London, were hopelessly understaffed. Temple's book, Christianity and the Social Order, came out in 1943. It is one of the foundation documents of our modern welfare state. I think it's still in print 76 years later. It didn't please everybody. Here is a cartoon that I found from the London Evening Standard in 1943. At the top, you will see Temple there, clergyman on the right-hand side. On the right-hand side, above the 3 ladies, you will see, I think it's a donkey. It says, Sacred Traditions of Capitalism. And the little wording there that the ladies are holding, one says, the daily sickening humbug, and the other says, wickedness of introducing Christian ideas into politics. The bottom cartoon shows Temple again. It says, trespassers will be prosecuted. And you see there are economic fields at the bottom. He's being told to keep out by the capitalists. Don't you know, it says at the bottom, sir, you are on private properties. There were many other achievements by Temple, but 2 stand out. In the early 19th century, very few people, of course, had the vote. By 1970, of course, it had all changed. But what happened in politics was not matched in my church. Government then still had a large say, and the Church of England was still largely run by the clergy, people like me. Change did come, but it came very slowly. Temple was one of the leaders of those who made change possible. Democracy in our church today is to a large extent thanks to Willie Temple. He was also one of the world leaders of the church unity movement. The relations of the churches to each other had all too often been marked by conflict, bitterness, and of course even war. The Civil War here, 300 years ago, was largely about religion and between Christians. And when we were not at war, relations were all too often marked by suspicion and mutual silence. Much of Temple's life, working life, was devoted to bringing the churches together. He was a leader of the worldwide Christian unity movement and is still honoured round the world for the generosity and humility that made all that possible. I think if Temple had been born 70 years later, I have a hunch that he would have been an outstanding interfaith pioneer and leader today. 3 areas, then, where Temple influenced national and church life: the welfare state, church government, and church unity. There were, of course, other contributions, several major works of philosophical theology, books on prayer, and spiritual guidance. But perhaps what we remember him in the church most of all is for none of these things, but what sort of person he was. Despite his almost aristocratic background, he was a true man of the people, humble, generous, a man for whom friendship came as natural as breathing. He was a man of prayer, deeply spiritual, but never pious in a bad way. No wonder that he was called the people's Archbishop. Some of his ideas are now on the back burner. He believed strongly in the Church of England as the state church, guiding national life into Christian paths. Our influence is now, of course, much less than it was 70 years ago. Correct me if I'm wrong, but as I understand it, Temple's approach here has a very clear resonance with Islamic thinking. To close, 2 memorable things that were said about Temple. Among all the tributes after his sudden death in 1944, the one with which his biography ends was the comment, rather unexpected, "He was such a jolly man." And the other was by Churchill, when he nominated him. Prime Ministers don't do that now. He said, "I had to appoint Temple. He was the only 50p item in a 5p sale." Thank you.